The war against women. Part 2. Institutional wars against women. Women are disadvantaged in every area of life. This section surveys attitudes toward women in institutions, mainly in the United States, where discrimination remains strong despite feminist efforts to raise awareness of both overt and subtle women hatred. First, we will examine justifications for women hatred offered by cultural authorities, male scientists. Sociobiological proofs of female inferiority. During the 19th century, philosophers and physical scientists in many European countries devoted themselves to proving the inherent inferiority of women, people of color, and Jews. Using physiognomy, bumps on the skull, specious intelligence tests, and other contrived evidence, they authoritatively demonstrated that all groups other than white Gentile males were subject to criminal tendencies, subnormal intellects, or other kinds of inferiority. The works of these highly respected men justified white genocidal practices in Africa and provided a scientific base for Nazism and other racist and sexist ideologies in the West. The intellectuals of today who supply the theories undergirding sexism and racism are mainly academic animal researchers and sociobiologists. The Academy continues to esteem these men even though feminist scholars are quick to point out their biases. Sarah Lucia Hoagland, for example, analyzes the way sexual determinists use rhetoric to reach conclusions not demonstrated by the facts. In the 1960s and 1970s, several books became highly popular for proving innate male aggressiveness and male dominance. While drawing their examples mainly from certain mammals, male authors did not hesitate to extend their argument to prove the inevitability of patriarchy among humans. A reading public that revered men touted as eminent scientists did not perceive the serious methodological flaws and factitiousness of their arguments. Authors sophisticated in using objective fact to mask preconceptions of male dominance, or perhaps blinded by their own overriding need, made unsubstantiated extrapolations from animal to human life. These works of pop anthropology prepared the ground for sociobiology, which arose soon after the second wave of the women's movement, and Hoagland believes in response to it. Sociobiology is evoked to challenge feminist assertions of human equality. It too tries to justify male dominance among humans by showing that male dominance, rape, and infanticide exist among animals. Again, the material is carefully selected, slanted, and often false. Many scientists have challenged the accuracy of sociobiological data in sophisticated technical arguments I will not summarize here. This discussion is limited to sociobiologists' use of language. Sociobiological proofs are often only preconceptions filtered and disguised by implicit male-dominant language. The father of the discipline, E.O. Wilson, did not hesitate to make unsupported statements. In Sociobiology, 1975, the book that provided the foundation for most later work in the field, he regularly asserts, males are dominant over females, without at any time defending the statement. This is especially ironic since Wilson is an entomologist, a specialist in insects, species in which sexual domination does not occur, but is almost always female domination of males. Yet, Wilson treats male aggression as if it were simply normal, while dismissing female aggression as non-adaptive. He also overlooks the reasons animals act aggressively, mainly when they perceive their survival or that of their young to be threatened by attack, which only occasionally motivates human aggression. Distinguishing sexual, territorial, and dominance motives for aggression, Wilson asserts that males must dominate other males to nudge them out of the contest for food, territory, or females, and claims that the rank ordering of males lies entirely above that of females. My emphasis. But unless he converses with animals, it is uncertain how he can know this. What he means is that male animals of certain species from which he extrapolates, have dominance contests with each other, and females do not. For him, this makes males superior. It may give fact to patriarchal interpretation It may give some readers the opposite impression. Such leaps from seeming fact to patriarchal interpretation are common in his work. For instance, pike blenny males are aggressive toward other males who enter their territory. Female pike blenny move through all territories as they please. Wilson interprets this to mean males control females. Similarly, faulty logic infects his use of the word harem. Many mammals live in all-female societies, associating with males only at mating season. Other females live together with a resident male. One cannot, of course, be sure precisely why they do this, but it is possible that females created such arrangements to avoid control male aggression. It does not have to do more than one. It does not do to have more than one cock in a barnyard. They fight each other. Females need males only for procreation, and for this, one will suffice. So they isolate the males or include only one in their company. Hoagland stresses the absurdity of using the term harem in discussing mountain sheep. Oh my gosh, it's 11 at night. Oh my god. Oh my god. I have to edit this out. I don't have video editing software. Oh, does this mean I'm supposed to answer the phone? It's literally 11 at night. Who is calling? Oh my god, this is the worst thing that's ever happened in my entire life. Don't call us. What the fuck is wrong with you? Oh, sorry, that was unrelated. Someone answered it. Jesus. That better be like a goddamn emergency. One cannot, of course, be sure precisely why they. Hoagland stresses the absurdity of using the term harem in discussing mountain sheep who live in female-centered societies, inherit home ranges from other females, and associate with a few males during mating season. But Wilson calls such arrangements harems, as if males had authority over females. But authority, the right, won and backed by power, to dictate behavior, the form of relationships and other activities, does not exist among animals. No animal directs the general behavior of other animals, either to constrict or empower them. Rank may lead a subordinate animal to show deference to a dominant animal, or permit a dominant animal to oust a subordinate one from a territory or away from food, but rank, which exists only in certain species, always affects either females or males. It never gives one sex primacy over the other. Even in insect species in which males exist mainly to service females, females do not have authority over males. Males do not prey on females in any species but the human. Although in some cases, under extreme stress, males do kill infants of their own species, and females of some species may kill males after mating. Hoagland suspects that Wilson finds sex and aggression identical. Indeed, Wilson writes that sex, which generations of poets and philosophers have seen as the force binding society, eros, the counterforce to aggression, is an anti-social force in evolution. Bonds are formed between individuals in spite of sex and not because of it. Through language, Hoagland writes, Wilson embeds the idea that by merely engaging in sex, the male dominates the female. A female who has sex with a male is, by that act, dominated by a male. To Wilson, sexual concourse is an act of war. So he describes females as taking a receptive or submissive posture. Female sexual posture can be seen as meeting a male halfway or actively luring him on. Both sexes display their genitals when they want to mate, and males sometimes present a posterior position. Wilson considers males who take a posture like that of females homosexual. He describes them as taking a female receptive or cyto-female posture to be mounted, and approves another scientist's description of a male Hamadryas baboon's display as a homosexual appeasement ceremony, like a military salute. Hoagland concludes, the linguistically embedded message is clear. Male penetration equals male domination. Feminist Andrea Dworkin, too, considers male-female sexual intercourse inherent subjugation, but a position that garners Wilson's praise and imitation wins Dworkin male scorn and outrage. Clearly, ideas are judged not on their merits, but by the sex of the person holding them. Wilson is only one of many biologists with a patriarchal agenda. Robert R. Warner describes a fish that changes sex, the wrasse. A few dominant Caribbean bluehead wrasse males can easily control these sites and thus the females that gather at them. The Pacific cleaner wrasse lives in harems consisting of a single male and several females in species that live and mate in larger social groups. The smaller fish produce nearly all eggs, while the largest, dominant individual produces mostly sperm and mates with all the subordinates, saving energy for controlling his harem rather than for making eggs. This is odd language indeed to use about fish, especially since the male wrasse is a female who transforms herself into a sperm producer. That few males are necessary in the natural economy of wrasse life can be read as indicating the greater value of females. But Warner needs the male myth. The words control and harem confer an authority and power which the fish does not possess. All he, formerly she, does is fertilize the female's eggs. In discussing the anemone fish, whose males transform themselves into females when an older female dies, Warner omits the discomfiting fact that the male anemone fish is much smaller than the female. The social arrangements of lions have been lovingly culled for signs of male supremacy. After all, the lion is the king of the forest, king of the beasts. Where better to seek justification for kingship among men? Robert Ardrey mythologizes the species. A lion pride is a hunting unit, and this would seem to be the sole reason for its existence. And it is the extraordinary dominance of the male lion and little else that welds the society together. The male lion rarely makes the kill. Such entertainments he leaves to the lionesses. His normal position in the hunting pride is in the center, with the lionesses spread out on either flank, considerably in advance. But Evelyn Reed points out what Ardrey calls a lion pride is actually a group of lionesses who permit a male access to their group. On his own, the male lion hunts and kills his own food, but when he is attached to the group of females, they are in charge of the hunt. Male lions neither hunt nor provide food for females. They offer only occasional use for procreation, and females, for the most part, keep them at a distance. Females hunt and provide food for themselves, their cubs, and any male they allow to join their group. Reed concludes, contrary to Ardrey's opinion, the pride of lionesses is welded together, not by the extraordinary dominance of the male, but by the maternal function of the females. Wilson's use of precisely the same material is almost funny. The pride males permit the females to lead them from one place to another, and they depend on them to hunt and kill most of the prey. Once the animal is downed, the males move in and use their superior size to push the lionesses and cubs aside to eat their fill. The war against women in education. With teachers like Wilson in our universities, it is no wonder that females are treated differently from males in education. Research at all levels shows that a paper or thesis bearing a female name gets a lower grade than precisely the same paper or thesis delivered under a male name. Such tests done with official documents signed by female and male authorities show the latter taken more seriously. Other studies show that teachers of co-ed classes give 2/3 of their attention to boys, yet they and their students have the perception that girls and boys are being treated alike. If girls get even 40% of the attention, boys usually complain. A male teacher who felt that girls did not ask questions as often as boys or offer information or elaborate extensively on a topic as boys did, tried to change the situation. He found that if a girl tried to take the floor, the boys stopped her immediately, ridiculing her in an effort to silence her. If you add to this treatment the white male-centered, male-exalting curriculum of our schools, you understand why a recent study showed that girls who are confident and assertive at age 9 emerge from adolescence with pitiably low self-esteem, and why generally, Gloria Steinem points out, the more education women have, the lower their self-esteem. Interestingly, the study showed that black girls lost less self-esteem and Hispanic girls lost it more slowly than whites. The researchers offered no theories about Hispanic girls, but theorized that black girls draw their self-image from family and community rather than school performance, and that black families tend to provide strong female role models. But the difference could also be related to the poor education most blacks receive in the United States. I often thank my poor early education for the fact that I retained confidence in my intellect into adulthood. Are you black, Marilyn? This tendency to see women as not mattering pervades all institutions, which everywhere treat women differently from men. While some men claim to treat women differently out of protectiveness or affection, the effects of their acts is so devastating to women that they amount to a state of siege. Male campaigns against women are so concerted. Government, judicial, penal, medical, and media establishments all cooperate in a way that cannot be called conspiratorial only because their aims never need to be stated. That is sometimes hard to distinguish a single source in a particular campaign. This fact has led me to structure the following section under broad categories: war against women's personhood and war against women as mothers. Each is subdivided to focus on the institution primarily waging the campaign, but you will observe the broader institutional cooperation characterizing them. War against women's personhood. The United States is unique among industrial nations in continuing to deny its people responsive social services, free advanced education, or medical care. This omission harms the poor most, and since 4/5 of the poorest people in the country are women and children, they bear the greatest injury. But American institutions do not stop at neglect, they wage out-and-out war against women. Judicial and penal systems. In 1988, Jack Hampton, a judge in Dallas, Texas, gave a light sentence to a man convicted of murdering 2 homosexual men, intimating that this was not a serious crime. I put prostitutes and gays at about the same level, and I'd be hard put to give somebody life for killing a prostitute. This was in 1988, and now gay marriage is legal in the Supreme Court, but sex work is still illegal. Okay. Gay men protested his verdict, but women did not. Yet this man was essentially defining gay men and prostitutes as not human beings. The state commission investigated the judge for bias and cleared him completely in a preliminary report. His lawyer explained that after all, his only inappropriate act was using the word queer. After an outcry, the commission censured the judge but left him on the bench. In 1989, a jury in Grand Rapids, Michigan, convicted Clarence Ratliff of attempted murder, which carries a possible life sentence, for shooting at 2 officers. But he had killed his estranged wife, Carol Irons, a district judge sympathetic to victims of domestic violence. Charged with murdering Irons, Ratliff was convicted only of manslaughter, with a maximum penalty of 15 years in prison. 1,000 people rallied to protest. Dottie Clune, an organizer of the protest, said, "We are outraged that the murder of a woman is considered less serious than shooting at and missing 2 men." In 1991, an admitted rapist in Daytona Beach, Florida, accepted a plea bargain for a 4.5-year sentence for rape that was accompanied by a beating. But the judge in his case, Kenneth Loeffler, gave him 2 years probation, justifying his leniency by accusing the victim of being a victimizer of men and a pitiful woman. Judge Loeffler has retired. Recent studies of the legal systems of Massachusetts, New Jersey, New York, Rhode Island, Maryland, Nevada, and Connecticut show all to be pervaded by bias against women and demonstrate that male bias harms women across the board, from lawyers to litigants to court employees. Refusal to see women as full human beings makes it harder for women to escape from domestic violence and makes it harder for women to practice law. Courts impose longer sentences on women, and prisons treat them more harshly than most men. Male lawyers and judges touch, yell at, harass, or speak contemptuously to women lawyers, litigants, and prisoners. They are 3 times more likely to address female than male lawyers by their first names or terms of endearment, and their familiarity may diminish female lawyers' effectiveness with the juries. A Connecticut judge publicly complained about the feminization of the public defender's office, charging that since women lawyers cannot handle accused clients roughly by pushing them up against a wall, for instance, they mishandled criminal cases. Divorced women cannot easily find lawyers to represent them and get little help in collecting child support. Male lawyers and judges refuse to take charges of sexual assault seriously when victim and accused are acquainted. The top echelons of the judicial system are overweighted with men. Women make up only 10% of trial judges, but 90% of the clerks. The Massachusetts study showed that judges punish women unfairly with longer sentences and probationary periods than men convicted of similar crimes. In 1984, a federal judge sentenced Susan Rosenberg to 58 years in prison for illegal possession of weapons. Men who commit murder get less. Moreover, she and 2 other women, Sylvia Baraldini and Alejandrina Torres, were kept in a specially built women's control unit at the federal penitentiary in Lexington, Kentucky. The unit was underground, lit by fluorescent lamps 24 hours a day. The women were under round-the-clock surveillance by 11 video cameras, tended by male guards who verbally and sexually harassed them. They were given half an hour to walk to and from the shower room and take their showers. Their mail was censored, political materials removed. They were subjected to random strip searches and humiliated by having to ask a male guard for sanitary napkins one at a time as they needed them. Their every action and every conversation was recorded in the prison logbook. They were deprived of sleep, clothes, food, medicine, exercise, fresh air, and light. For the government to build a special prison unit for 3 people was extraordinary, as was their cruel treatment. Their sin was to be female political prisoners, the only female political prisoners in federal custody. The government seemed to feel they were more dangerous than male political prisoners who are not isolated from the general prison population. Torres, a Puerto Rican tied to a Puerto Rican revolutionary organization, is now 52 years old, a mother with a heart condition that is going untreated. Baraldini, an Italian citizen, Communist Party member and political activist, was convicted of conspiracy and racketeering in connection with the Brinks armored car robbery. Rosenberg had revolutionary sympathies. She was arrested in 1979 when Joanne Chesimard escaped from prison, and in 1981 in connection with the Brinks robbery. In both cases, charges were dropped because no evidence linked her to these events. She was indicted again in 1983 in the Capitol bombing, but the only crime that the government could convict her of in 1984 was for possession of weapons and explosives. The conditions of the women's imprisonment would be labeled torture if they were inflicted on prisoners of war. These women, political revolutionaries, were involved in actions considered criminal. They did not kill anyone, yet their sentences are heavier than those of men who have. Yu Kikumura, a Japanese man who prosecutors charge, is a member of the terrorist Japanese Red Army, admitted conveying bombs in his car on the New Jersey Turnpike in 1988. He was sentenced to 30 years in prison, 28 years less than Rosenberg, but an appeals court ruled that the judge had overstepped the limits of federal sentencing guidelines and ordered this sentence reduced. Kikumura is now serving 21 years and 10 months, less than half Rosenberg's sentence, for an identical act. A woman convicted of aiding and abetting, not committing, a bank robbery in Georgia in 1981 was sentenced to 50 years in prison. Men's average sentence for murder is 6 years. When word leaked out on the women's situation, organizations including The Nation initiated a campaign to remove them from the unit. In an attempt to show that 3 had not been singled out for this cruel treatment, prison officials hurriedly brought in 2 other women serving long sentences, but not for political crimes. They promised to close the Lexington unit, but as of late 1991 had not done so. But the treatment of the women in Lexington is different only in degree from that of all imprisoned women. In jail, too, women are separate and unequal. In Massachusetts, men are held in county jails, women in a somewhat inaccessible central prison. Legal advisors and family have a hard time reaching the women's jail, which is squalid, deplorable, and dangerously overcrowded. A similar situation exists across the country. The number of women in prison tripled in the 1980s. About 60% of women in federal prisons have been convicted of drug-related offenses like theft, prostitution, and armed robbery. Writes George J. Church. Many of those convicted of murder, at least 40% and probably more, killed men who were beating them. About 80% of women in state prisons have children, and 85% of those have custody. For them, the cruelest punishment is separating from their children. Children brought for visits shriek at parting. A society really concerned with the family would consider children's welfare and imprisoning mothers and find some way not to separate them. But the American penal system makes no allowance for children who are foisted on relatives, often impoverished themselves, or into state institutions to grow up unloved, unhappy, and perhaps to become offenders themselves. The fathers rarely take these children and do not help the women, yet the state expects the wife of a jailed man to take responsibility for her children and charges women with neglect who do not. In this context of differential responsibility, it is par for the course that husbands, brothers, and boyfriends drop a jailed woman like a hot potato, says Alan Sheloff, New York City Correction Commissioner. Although wives, mothers, and female friends throng to men's prisons on visiting days. Women inmates are visited mainly by female friends and relatives. Society is not responsible for the fact that imprisoned women suffer more than most imprisoned men for separation from their children, but it is responsible for not treating them equally. Prisons train male inmates for high-paying jobs like welding and mechanics, but offer women training as homemakers, launderers, or beauticians. The pity of it, Church reports, is that women, who are often the sole support of their families, are more motivated career-wise than the men, according to Paul Bestolarides, director of a program at the Northern California Women's Facility that offers them training as electricians and landscapers. And healthcare at women's prisons is a crisis stage. The federal system's only hospital for women in Lexington, Kentucky, only intermittently has a full-time obstetrician, gynecologist, even though 1 out of 4 women entering prison is pregnant or has recently given birth. Most pregnant inmates get little or no prenatal care, even high-risk drug users. Yet medical doctors persecute pregnant drug users under the guise of concern for the fetus. That concern for fetuses is so selective, suggests that it is really controlling women that motivates men. In 1990, men in New London, Connecticut, resuscitated an old law to prosecute their wives for adultery. Simply on their husbands' statements, police arrested 3 women and 1 alleged male lover and charged them with adultery, punishable under the law by up to a year in prison. The police willingly went along with this. Connecticut has since repealed the law. Many police departments have made efforts to be more sensitive to victims of rape and child abuse, and some are even trying to overcome prejudice against people of color. But in general, police departments show systemic prejudice against women. It is well known that police fear domestic disputes above all other calls because of the unpredictability of the men involved. Yet they have consistently shown themselves unsympathetic or incredulous toward women who kill their batterers. Of course, they themselves are often batterers. In Mexico City, they were also rapists. The Judicial Police, the equivalent of the FBI, led a gang that beat, raped, and robbed over a dozen women in 1989. Some were bodyguards for the head of Mexico's anti-drug program and used government vehicles and machine guns to abduct women. Charges against many of them were dropped, others were pursued only because the victims came from prominent families. The medical system. The male medical profession began as a war on women, which continued through the late Middle Ages with campaigns against midwives. Once men dominated the healing profession, by the 18th century, they treated women differently from men. For example, tuberculosis in men was a lung disease. In women, it was seen as caused by the uterus. In this century, besides mutilating female genitals, doctors lobotomized women. 2 out of 3 lobotomies were performed on women, surgically removing part of 50,000 brains, despite little evidence that it helped and considerable evidence that it harmed them. Dismissing female patients' complaints as neurotic, men know women are unhappy. They overwhelmingly prescribed psychoactive drugs for women, 67% of all tranquilizers and mood elevators. It took a campaign initiated by a woman to restrain male physicians from removing an entire breast, mastectomy, instead of just the cancer, lumpectomy, in cases of breast cancer, and major campaigns to restrain them from performing unnecessary hysterectomies. Medical researchers seeking preventative measures for disease focus almost entirely on men. The main killer of postmenopausal women is heart disease, but the highly touted warnings about cholesterol, for instance, are based entirely on studies of men. Diets promoted by the American Heart Association, among others,